My apologies.
That's okay.
Dr. Ben Kuo. And also on computer, we have our external here from the University of Calgary, Dr. Yahya Al-Lahib. Thank you very much for being here, Dr. Al-Lahib. Okay, so today, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a presentation by Riham, where she talks to us about her research findings, and then we're going to start an order of questioning. And we start first with committee members. We start with the most external member of the committee, and we move gradually closer to the supervisor, Dr. Park. We'll do a few rounds of questions. We're going to limit each committee member's questions to 10 minutes to try and keep it moving because it's a big committee. And then once we're done with committee members, we'll open it up to the audience, so you'll have an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. Once we're through that, we ask you to leave again. And then the committee has a conversation, and we welcome just Riham back in at that point to chat with her about today. Are we ready?
I think we are.
Let me pass it over to you.
All right. Well, welcome and good morning. And with a warm cup of coffee, I would like to welcome everyone here to an integral milestone in my academic journey. My name is Riham Al-Saadi, and I'm here to present to you the defense on my dissertation titled Preserving My Arab Self While Finding My Home in Canada. It is a study on first-generation recent Arab immigrant emerging adults and their acculturation perspectives, as well as how they foresee the Canadian society's role in fostering equitable participation. I wish to begin by welcoming my committee, Chair Defense Dr. Engel, my committee members over here, Dr. Wansu Park, my supervisor, as well as my external from University of Calgary, Dr. Yahya Al-Lahib. I also wish to acknowledge that the University of Windsor sits on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwa, Odawa, and Potawatomi. This is my agenda for today. So what I'll do is that I'm going to dedicate my dissertation first, and then I'm going to actually invite you to learn about my positionality. And what I feel that is important so that you can see what perspective have I conducted this study from? Where do I come from as I conducted this study? And then allow me to guide you through all components of my dissertation over here. Okay, so I have a lot of dedications. This dissertation is dedicated to integral souls that I have lost. My sister Shirihan, my great grandma Khadija Ahmed, as you could say, my beloved grandpas Muhammad and Hussein, my parents Basima and Nazi, my sisters Sama and Mira, and the unique soul of Ahmed. Now let me guide you through the positionality. So I identify myself as a lifelong refugee. I am an Arab woman that comes from I'm a Palestinian Canadian woman that comes from an Arab ethnic background and a Muslim descent. Now there are two lenses that really guided me as I conducted this study. One of which is that settling here at 14 years of age. And what coincided with that are the September 11 events, which really forced me into an era of validating my identity, protecting my culture and my religion. And this aspect has also inspired me to become an advocate for Arab and Muslim communities. A little bit of the introduction here. So through its enactment of the Multiculturalism Policy and Act respectively, Canada was the first nation to officially frame multiculturalism in an official policy framework. However, that policy framework has been critiqued as to the fact that Canada is a white society or a white colonial society that really has its impositions. And the impact of that on immigrants overall, Arab immigrants in this case specifically, is quite integral, because what it does is that it puts them in polarized forces between what can I actually preserve out of my heritage and how do I find my home here in Canada. Who are Arabs in Canada? How much do we have here? Great representation. Now, as of 2016, we house 1 million Arabs. However, that number has drastically changed, of course, with the Syrian refugees influx primarily, and also other Arabs that found their home in Canada as a refugee or as an immigrant. Now, the theoretical framework that really guided my study, and I found home in it, I should say, is that of critical race theory. So what does that say? Critical race theory actually originates from critical theory, and what it does is that it helps us understand how the interrelation between race, racism, and the law do interact to actually continue preserving the racial power differences over time. That concept has originated with Crenshaw as she studied the experiences of black women in the United States. With that comes an integral concept that, for lack of a better term, I want to say like extends this concept, that of intersectionality. So what does intersectionality mean? It helps us understand how multiple identity modalities do pose someone and actually put them in multiple or simultaneous group memberships that really impact, first, how they shape their identity, and second, how does that lead to a multiplicative levels of bias, discrimination, or oppression and racism. This is a very quick snapshot of the literature, of course, for the purposes of time. So let me just, allow me to define to you through the literature, what does the term Arab mean? Arab is an individual or a group that share a common ethno-linguistic identity. Multiple ways can be actually used to define that. So whether it's geographic location, migration history, means of communication, and having a common culture. A very common approach as well, if an individual belongs to one of the 22 Arab nations of the Arab League. You'll see that a lot in research as well. Now, if we want to define or understand the Arab ethnocultural identity, on the other hand, we need to look at the intersect between that Arab ethnicity and heritage, along with where is it practiced, how is it practiced, and what I found in the literature is that religious identity is very important and it's an inseparable component out of that Arab identity, of course, alongside the socio-political milestones that can come on the way. Through my literature review, I focus on Arab immigrants in the US and in Canada. So this is, again, a very quick snapshot of what the literature actually entails. In terms of the US, the studies on Arab immigrants actually, focus on the identity aspect. So really that evolution of white identity and how they relate to it. Also, they spoke about the post-immigration experiences as impacted by pre-immigration distress, such as prosecution, escaping war, etc., and then coming here with the language barriers, xenophobia, racism, discrimination. Of course, a lot of the studies also spoke to the September 11 effect, but it wasn't even the only event. It was also multiple events. And that has also shaped the studies in Canada. However, in Canada, the literature focused more on the perception of the Arab culture, the relationship between the parent, emerging adult, parent, youth, those cultural negotiations and expectations, and that how the family is the first unit of that connection. The commitment to Arab and Canadian identities was key, as well as the role of religion. Is it restrictive or is it a supportive factor? There are three primary gaps that I addressed with my study. So I focused on the process in and of itself of acculturation rather than the outcomes. I also invited participants or Arab participants from all religions because I really wanted to focus on distinguishing the Arab ethnicity from the religious component, as well as I wanted also to shed a light on the diverse experience of Arabs. So I wanted to kind of drive us away from looking at that experience from like a homogeneous perspective. Really wanted to guide what also happens there and maybe find out if there is a possible hierarchy that exists in that Arab community. So what was my research question? The study answers the research question, how do Arab immigrant emerging adults understand the acculturation phenomenon? Big question. Let me define to you very quickly two important terms here. So what do I mean by acculturation? Acculturation is a process of cultural and psychological changes that happen when two or more cultural groups actually come in contact with one another. So the change happens in both entities there. When it comes to the term emerging adulthood, this is more of a transitional developmental stage. It is a product of industrialized societies, my apologies, and what it characterized by is that, deviation away from normative expectations. I also had some sub-questions to help me understand a little bit more that acculturation phenomenon. So the first is, how does that Arab identity actually influence how much one preserves out of their heritage and how they decide to actively participate in the Canadian society, specifically for this study, or of course more local in Windsor, Essex. I also looked at what factors intersect to guide a positive acculturation or success, and in those Arab Arab immigrant emerging adults' perspectives, how does the Canadian society influence that immigration or acculturation experience in Canada? So what was the methodology like? The study was conducted using qualitative inquiry. I applied what is termed as a transcendental or psychological phenomenology. And what that does is actually helps us deviate away from interpretation and more so focus on arriving at a very rich description of a phenomenon of interest. So that was my interest here. When it comes to sampling, and thanks to the partners in the room as well, I'm happy to report that I had participants from all three sampling routes. So I had participants from purposive, theoretical, and snowball sampling. The study used focused one-on-one interviews that were conducted virtually. I applied for analysis, thematic analysis, specifically as guided by Brown and Clark, and I used a program called Max VDA, which kind of self-training, but also there was a lot of online modules that really helped me with that program. It was phenomenal to support the analysis. I also ensured that I maximized elements of trustworthiness and of course the ethical considerations to protect my participants. All right, let me take you to the findings. What did I find in this study? A little bit of demographics first. My study was informed by 27 participants. I had 18 females and 9 males. They ranged from 18 to 25 with an average of 20 years. When it comes to immigration status, refugees actually dominated my sample with 17 government-assisted refugees, 3 privately sponsored refugees. I also had a few other immigrant categories as you see here, and I'm happy to address more about what do the immigration statuses actually mean here. So I'll guide that following, of course, with your questions. My participants came from 4 different religious affiliations, and I want to just highlight here a little point. While it could arguably the Chaldean and the Christian could be amalgamated together, the Chaldean is more of a, conceptualized as a cultural as well as a religious. However, what I did is I followed what my participants told me, did not guide anything beyond that. So I wanted to understand, and hopefully in the future we'll get some more on that. My participants came from 6 demographic backgrounds. It was dominated by the Syrian and Iraqi participants, respectively. This is a very important and very interesting finding in my study. So while when I asked about languages spoken at home, while Arabic dominated that list, my participants spoke 9 different languages at home. Some of that is factored into like where they come from home. However, a very important factor here is that aspect of secondary migration, because a lot of my participant recall are dominantly refugees, so they selected a country of, they were in a country of asylum before selecting Canada as their home. So they actually gathered a lot of that linguistic power, as I call it. Now it comes to the themes. The study actually emerged, or I had 5 themes that emerged out of my study. I have a couple of disclaimers here. So you might see, or not you might see, you will see names, and those are pseudonyms. They have nothing to do with the participant. I just make sure that I select culturally appropriate names, but has no connection whatsoever to the participant themselves. And what I wanted to also highlight is that half of my interviews were conducted in English and half in Arabic. So if you see some grammatical differences here, this is the reason why. I try to be as true as I can to what they actually informed me. The first theme is that tensions between Arab and Canadian cultures while settling in Canada. So this theme speaks to the basically conceptualizations and decisions. What do they make out of decisions to what they preserve out of their heritage? How do they understand and perceive the Canadian society? So Sila here informs us about the Arab commitment to the Arab heritage. So she says, they Arabs value family a lot and family norms. There's a lot of values, there is respect, traditions, and all this is passed on from generation to generations to generations. These still exist, they are not going to fade away with time. You hear the commitment in her voice here. Hayek spoke to the Canadian society, and what she described it as, the Canadian society is, or are very gentle. They push you to do the hard work, or the hard thing, Like, okay, we know you are Arabic, and we know you can't speak English, but we will help you. There are a lot of Canadians who get happy when they see an Arab girl working similarly to their job. They get happy, like she is from a different religion or a different country, and she's working like us. Now, while this is a positive element, through my analysis, I kind of investigated whether, are we prescribing what success is like? Are we prescribing how should someone live and actually present themselves in this society? That was another discussion that I had here. The second theme was on impact of language on the sense of belonging. So what did I find is that, or what I found is that when the preservation of Arabic is actually a symbolism of preservation of identity. So they were really eager to keep that Arabic with them. And that English was actually a gateway to the settler society. So Shahnaz explains to us the Arabic language piece of things, where she says, our language helped us a lot because if it wasn't for Arabic, how would I be able to function? No one would have been able to communicate with me if I didn't know Arabic, so it helped me to make friends and learn many things about school, know places, etc. Adorina takes us more to the English language part, and what she says is that, so I started practicing and I started talking to people more and more. Then I started realizing I'm fitting in. You see the sense of belonging here. It's really great. I like when I speak English and I feel like I'm speaking the powerful language. The terms powerful language were very interesting to me, so I kind of sat with them a little bit to see or understand a little bit further what they mean. When it comes to my third theme, so within this theme, the participants are speaking to how do they foresee the expectations essentially that are imposed, for lack of a better term, by the Canadian Settler Society, and also how they respond to it a little bit with some requests happening here. Yes, that says, you know how the settlement agencies actually, I should say, provide educational sessions, and that's what she was informing me about. So she said, educational sessions, what the law means, what is the law in Canada is important to you. It is important to understand that I'm an immigrant, but I'm here, and I'm part of this community, so they are teaching me how to be part of it. This helped us become part of Canadians who are obeying the law. You see how much of the kind of the guidance, the prescription, the navigation here. Madeline speaks to something structural, and she talks about a system that we use here, APA or MLA. She says, I'm writing in and I'm struggling with APA and MLA. I did not hear about them until last semester, believe it or not. This is my biggest milestone. But at the same time, I'm like, how do you expect a person here for this line to know what you're talking about? So she's calling for extra help. And I truly agreed with her because I was like, I had no idea before coming here, right? That was I love that quote. I really had a great conversation with her, phenomenal. With my fourth theme, it talks about how does those participants maintain that Arab intersectional identity in that colonial settler society. Georgia has a beautiful description when I asked her simply, that was my question, what is your racial identity? And that was her response to me. She said, I think there's a difference between citizenship and race. I would consider myself Lebanese and I would consider myself Canadian, but this is according to my passport. If it comes to genes and everything, I'm Lebanese and both of my parents are Lebanese. People who are born in Lebanon, they do not have genes from outside. My mom has a passport because she lived outside. She is not born Canadian. She does not have the white genes and all. So she was associating Canadian with the white gene or white identity more when she spoke to that. Love that quote from her. Now Adam takes us to the religious component. He talks about how he is Arab but also Muslim. So he speaks to and says, now because I'm Muslim is something, but because I'm Arab, no, there's nothing. Because I'm Muslim, for example, we have it in Islam that we cannot eat meat unless if it's halal food. Here, the halal food meat is different than the regular one, more expensive. So our religion is like that. We eat halal food. So he was talking to us about a structural barrier. We make it available, but we make it at a little bit of a different rate here. Finally, my fifth and final theme, participants were speaking about how they perceived their participation, their relationship, and how they interacted with the Canadian society, specifically in Windsor, Essex. Nihal describes it, and she says, in the beginning, when newcomers first come here, they tell them we will open the schools for you, so you get your education and learn. I feel that if they want for someone to learn the language, they have to always let the person be involved with other people and not with Arab people so that the person can learn the language. This is a very dominant voice in my sample. More interaction with others from outside the Arab community was a completely dominated, I want to say confidently, that 27 of them have spoken to me about an example like that. We need more, we need more. Rami speaks to us actually about how he wishes also to be guided, what kind of values do we have here? What do we value here as a Canadian cultural society? So he says, yeah, for the newcomers, newcomers, we should give them tips, for example, like where should they volunteer? Teach them about the Canadian culture and things that they like us to do, like respect, for example, respect their religion, respect their culture, and help each other, support each other on our hard time, and not give up. So, this slide, I would say, is like the answer to my research question. I kind of put it a little bit together. So, what did I understand about acculturation as understood by the Arab immigrant emerging adult? Arab immigrant emerging adults understood the acculturation process in Canada as a mutual dedication and a collaborative process of exchanging cultural knowledge between the Arab heritage group and the dominant Canadian society. There are three factors primarily that the participants identified as leading to a successful experience in their terms, which are the welcoming nature that we have here, the acceptance, so feeling accepted, and getting the support. However, there is a lot of emotional labor that is involved here. Significant emotional labor is involved for them to kind of even navigate between what do I want to keep out of my heritage, what do I want to get out of this culture, and a lot of resolution of those tensions is what makes it a little bit of a complex experience. So we need to be mindful and supportive of that process. Discussion here combines my literature with what my findings were. So what were my derived lessons here? Now the critical race theory, it did help me understand or reveals how does colonialism and the preserved natural structural oppressions guard our nation against unnecessary social change. Sometimes those practices are quite embedded in our system that the change is a little bit more complex. It takes a little bit more work from us. Something I didn't mention in the quotes, but a lot of my participants, if not even all, I want to say, they talked about the concept of we need to express our gratitude to Canada. So to me, it was, I wonder if that's kind of an element of maintaining that inequitable hierarchical structure that we have, which preserves the white settler society as a privileged group. And I wondered if there's a possible link here to, even in terms of their awareness of the support and services. As we all know, I'm going to say the practitioner side here, there are differences depending on the immigrant and refugee categories of their awareness even of what supports here exist. Also, with education, it is actually a gateway for them. So education was highly, highly valued. And it's a gateway for their individuals and the families. So the educational success is not just attributed to the individual, the family has a part to it too. It's a success to the family here. Some of the challenges that they shared with me are like limited socialization opportunities. Once again, assumptions about their limited capabilities. They heard a lot that they are limited in their capabilities. And I'm quoting here actually, I think it's from one of my classes, I should say, one of participants, I should mention here, they were all told basically to settle for more realistic educational and career goals. And that kind of is a struggle for me to hear because I know there's a lot of potential, as we all know, to actually help them grow how they see themselves. Also, I wonder, or through the dissertation and conducting it, I understood that I believe that we are actually promoting or supporting more assimilative rather than integrative approaches in Canada. And I understand that as more so systemically and structurally embedded in our system. The prime consequence of that is that emotional labor between the polarized forces. Who am I and what do I need to get out of here? When it comes to that as well, an element that was not presented, I want to say, is that counter-narrative of Canada and its colonialism history. That was not presented to my participants. I did not sense any awareness of that. So I wonder if that was more of a subtle racism and discrimination element here. Practicing the intersectional Arab identity. I want to investigate a little bit more, but it sounds to me like the racial identity is also socially polarized or practiced within the setting that it's practiced. The gender identity is a little bit of a difference here. So I want to talk about the gender female role. Female success is no longer just attributed to starting a family, and I'm not belittling, of course, because it's not a just here, but conceptually also elements of educational and professional success are key. To my participants, some of them came from minority backgrounds, like the Kurdish Syrian, for example, and they did speak to Canada being liberating in terms of their experience, while they had a lot of oppression back home that they couldn't practice it. But I also asked, at what cost is that? Finally, conclusions. Where is my research going next? So a couple of implications here immigrant emerging adults draw upon multiple inferences to choose how they enculturate. It is an active process for them. And that when we want to understand enculturation, we need to consider multiple factors here, whether it's the migration side, journey of immigration and timing, also the dominant narrative of Canada being a welcoming community. Some of the limitations very quickly is the translation from Arabic to English, so I wonder maybe some meanings might be lost in translation. That racial identity and equitability, or not equitability, equitable participation questions, I believe that those could have been developed a little bit more, and I could understand a little bit more about perception, maybe in a future study. I wonder how that will go. Also, of course, the COVID-19 impact. It impacted my process, and it also impacted their experience. They were limited in their experience. Finally, where's the future directions? Where's the research going next? So here are some recommendations I have. In terms of the research aspect, I see that future studies on equitable participation, racial and ethnic identity, specifically as practiced in colonial societies, are integral. Such examples from my study are like the Kurdish Syrian, or identifying as Chaldean versus Christian, and the concept of secondary migration is important. When it comes to social work education, I think we need to now kind of progress a little bit beyond the common cultural competence, cultural sensitivity that my colleagues are here sharing. We need to look at more concurrent terms, such as just a very basic example is cultural humility, and something more than that. Kind of practice it in a little bit of a different lens, maybe through the intersectionality, maybe through inviting scholarship from diverse scholars, also applying the critical lens and critical race lens to look at multiple embedded structures, and cultural knowledge exchange should be really promoted. When it comes to the practice implications, so for practitioners and professionals like my colleagues here as well, I think we need to look at success as more of a different lens. We need to look at it as a collaborative process. We need to integrate and be inclusive a little bit more in the school experience, maybe by going back and asking how, what is still missing, that component. Some secondary migration and pre-migration trauma elements should be incorporated, and I really wanted to highlight, we need to actually support the adoption of multilingualism. Arabic and having it, or other home language having it, is not going to be a barrier to learning English. It is actually a supporter factor to learning English. That's what I learned from my study here. And finally, on the policy side of things, I wish to see more of an equitable support for all immigrant and refugee routes. A little bit more collaborations happening between our federal and local entities, I should say, and more reconsiderations to how the policies within the Ministry of Education. And yeah, that brings me, I think, to the end. So these are my references. Just want to thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Should we stop the screen share?
Yes,
so that we can,
absolutely.
Faces back?
Absolutely, I agree with you. I'm gonna actually do it in a gallery view so we can see better. There. Is that good?
That's great. Thank you, Riham. Are you going to take a seat, or are you going to stand?
I don't know.
Okay.
Either or.
Okay.
I'll try to do it.
Well, why don't we thank you? That was really, really fascinating.
Thank you.
A lot of work, a lot of thinking. So why don't we begin with Dr. Al-Lahi? Would you start us off with some questions?
Thank you, Riham, for doing this really excellent piece of work. I want to start by congratulating you on getting to this stage. It's a lifetime journey. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this exam. I want to start with a very generic question just to perhaps get us started. Can you speak to the tensions that, like your process of negotiating the tensions between your chosen theoretical frameworks and your methodological approach, and how that translated in your research process? You speak about this in a very good way in your thesis. Just to get us started, like those tensions, how do you negotiate them in making sense of the data and understanding participants' constructed meaning and so forth?
For sure, thank you. So, I think it was a very much of a process and a personal challenge, let me say. I think the primary aspect that really helped me is that that I used the critical race theory and intersectionality as my theoretical lenses, like the lenses that I even see my participants with. And what happened as well with that process, so that I can actually kind of congregate that with my methodology, is that I needed to liberate myself in that I can be part of the research. And that was a work in progress with my supervisor, of course, in my social work committee, because of the fact that the social work part, I guess, of it, let me speak to that piece, is that we are always asked to be actively participants, actively embedded in the lived experiences of those individuals that I'm actually going through. As well as when I kind of wanted to understand the tensions between the heritage and what are we prescribing here as the way to be, that was my biggest challenge. So I wasn't just kind of listening to only the words that they tell me, more so maybe the tone as well. When they had their cameras on, let me remember, I think I had 7 participants only that had cameras on. So I had to kind of rely on my listening to their voice of tone, tone of voice, my apologies, to see where is that, tension happening. And the third thing I want to mention here is the words tell them I'm working on myself. Tell them I'm successful. Tell them I learned APA and MLA. Please tell them I know what that is today. Tell them. It was a common voice. So my first time, I will admit to you, Dr. Lahib, I was afraid to put myself in that results and analysis. And then by the support of my committee, I was liberated to say, you know what, Riham, it's okay to be part of it, because I've been here too. So that was another lens I used. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. And perhaps a follow-up question.
Sure.
Like some of the tensions translated into how you interpreted your data. That's one of the examples. And I would use maybe your word, liberating. How did you negotiate that relationship of participants between their heritage, identity, and their relationship to Canada as a settler colonial state? And within that process, how did that unfold for you to make sense of the data? So one quote, I can't remember on what page, but one of the quotes suggests that this is a survival mechanism, yet it is a process of negotiation for participants to be part of the Canadian mosaic that negotiating in this process. So, can you speak to that process from your perspective as the researcher?
As the researcher, okay. So as the researcher and looking at that, I will say that I used what we contemporarily have been learning more about our colonial history. Because I will admit to you, Dr. Lahib, it's only 3 years that I know about this colonial history myself too. So what I tried to do is that I tried to integrate the fact of identity-wise, what am I feeling like being a settler on a colonial society as well, and colonizing almost a land, and that's where I come from today. What I tried to look and navigate into their words is that basically underlying fear. This is what I felt. There was a lot of fear of losing their Arab heritage, to the point that some participants, and it might not be presented in the quotes, some participants asked me, do I really have to give up, the language? Do you think I should focus more on just speaking purely English? I don't know. For example, I'm just using the language as a practical example. I think the way as a researcher I kind of navigated as well those tensions is looking at their perspective being also of a secondary migration nature. So their comparative note is not just Canada, their comparative note is that country of asylum, where racism and oppression may be actually more directly practiced. And here in Canada, we have it more, we softly put it in. We have it more embedded in our systems. So I wondered, while I'm reading and listening to them, through the interviews, through listening to the transcripts, where is it that they are kind of fearful? Where is it that they're also actively trying to be part of here? But also, I really was very nervous, I want to say for lack of a better term, about the cost. What cost are we asking those individuals to pay to be part of us? So that's how I, as a researcher, kind of processed and navigated that.
Excellent answer. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Why don't we move on to Dr. Hakeem Larson?
If you can hear the question, I can repeat it on the Zoom.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Riham. I have enjoyed watching you through your journey as a student, and I'm so glad that we're here today. So I have a lot of practical suggestions for you that you'll get after the meeting.
Perfect.
So I will just kind of stick to more of the conceptual things. for
Sounds
now.
good.
Okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
So one thing that I wanted to ask you about was the recommendations you might have for other researchers who are going to do research that in a bilingual way. Like you
Yes.
did some of your study in English and some in Arabic,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
So what recommendations would you have for other researchers who are going to face the same issue?
My very first recommendation is having, I would say, like if I had more time and more opportunity, I would have even yet one more research assistant. So I had a research assistant with me that also spoke the language. And the funny part is though, we spoke different dialects. She's Iraqi and she's Chaldean too. So we had to navigate also the translation that way. I wonder if it would have been different, let's say if I had someone who's like Lebanese Arabic, because I speak closer to that dialect. So that's one thing to attend to, I want to say. I don't know, in terms of the transcription, we did it directly to English. I don't know if it would have made a difference to do like Arabic first purely and then directly to English. I don't think it made much of a difference here because of a previous project that I was involved in. Like I thought maybe going directly to English and then going back and listening was kind of an helpful process. I would have loved to have another layer to actually go back and listen. But of course, for the dissertation and PhD journey, sometimes those are, limitations that you have, time factor. Another piece I want to say is that actually allow the participants to speak freely. I think that's what helped me here. Like my participants actually went back between English and Arabic, but I never stopped them from speaking English because that was the empowering part for them. So continue that part, I want to say. That was a very helpful part for me. Yeah.
I think that could possibly be a paper or a study all in and of itself.
Truly.
Is how to deal with these issues with an Arab population.
Absolutely.
Because you do have all the different dialects, number one, and people from different regions. And, Arabic is not Arabic, It's different in different regions.
That's
So
true.
You have to kind of take that all into account. And then your research assistants, and then who you are interviewing. And then the combination with English. And I know, like, even in Lebanon, they do 3 languages, right? Arabic and French.
It happened.
Right.
Yes,
all
it
3. So
happened.
you've got the mix of those
Exactly.
in what they are communicating with you. So I think that's something that could be a scholarly paper for you all by itself.
100%. I have quite a few elements that I really want to investigate further from my dissertation. So I would love to get that from you so that I can work on a scholarly piece on that.
I think
for
that
sure.
would be very interesting.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
So another issue is that you talked a little bit about disparity in different categories of immigrants and refugees in terms of supports and services that they receive. How do you think policymakers can benefit from learning more about this?
I'm gonna put my practitioner hat on for a moment. So, but the fact that I was at the Multicultural Council, for example, or those settlement agencies, I became directly aware of that difference, and I wondered why. So when I looked around about the actual political process of how we welcome immigrants and refugees, why is it different? As a government-assisted refugee, you have it all set for you. There's a whole structure plan between even coming here, welcoming, educational sessions, settlement support, etc., etc. So how I think the policymakers can benefit from this is that I think it's more of a call for a change here. That we need to As a privately sponsored refugee even, they have a difference. And I think I will speak to my project with Dr. Ko on the Syrian refugees, and we had that conversation, I think, in your office one time, Dr. Ko. And that's what I said to Dr. Ko, why is it so drastically different if I'm an immigrant or a refugee? I want to go back to my 14-year self. I did not even know that settlement agencies existed, I will admit to you. And it took about 6, 7 or more years to be even aware of that. So I want to call for policymakers to have a welcoming program that is equitable and inclusive no matter where you come from. If you're an immigrant, if you're a refugee, from however category you come from, that's exactly it. A welcoming program to Canada should be consistent. I don't understand why the difference is even there. I get the government involvement versus a little bit less government involvement, because that's a commitment too between like a government assisted or a privately sponsored refugee, let's say, or an immigrant. But it's still a commitment from our society here if we want them to be equitably active with us. So that's how I would call for that change.
Sounds like you've identified a really important problem to be solved.
I think so. Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate you.
Okay, so I will let you go on.
Okay.
Then do the next round.
Okay. Dr. Ko.
Thank you, Riham. So I'm trying to project my voice so the audience can hear and the panel can hear as well. Congratulations, once again. And I appreciate the effort that went into revising your document since your last one.
Yes.
It's so much better, strong dissertation. So thanks for that. So, Riham, I'm going to the questions I have really are about some thoughts and ideas, and relates to something I am very much interested in: acculturation and identity. So, it's interesting. Your dissertation is about first-generation recent Arab immigrant merchant adults as a group.
Yeah.
What I've learned from your dissertation is how heterogeneous this group is. The diversity. This is what I've learned from your document. And so here are some of the questions that I've related to that diversity that I find it interesting and fascinating, which shouldn't, I think, thinking back, this shouldn't be surprising. So here is one question as I was going through your methodology. So I think you indicated there are 13 people choose to be interviewed in English and 14 in Arabic,
Yes.
or the other way, something like
That's
that.
exactly it, I would say. 13 English, 14 Arabic, if my memory is there.
So given how similar these participants are in terms of their demographic, do you find any differences between those chosen to use English as opposed to Arabic in terms of their, I guess, cultural experience, their adaptation? That's my curiosity.
It's a great question, actually, because it's a question that definitely didn't skip my mind, while I was going through this. I want to say, and I'm thinking about 2 or 3 particular participants here, like Madeline is one of them. I think the upbringing and the home experience for those individuals was, I'm not going to say like not all of them were empowered. I'm just going to say the home experience, as in the expectations from the parents about how valuable it would be, for example, like to adopt the English, to continue practicing, to fight. So I'm going to use the word fight because they actually used it as well in the interviews. I wonder if that had an element, and as well, I cannot dismiss the fact of the actual school experience. So the individuals that actually chosen to conduct it in English, they had more exposure opportunities. And they also had a supportive, let's say, teacher or two that continuously gave them like reading materials on a daily basis, after school support, things like that. The others, it could be a combined factor between being timid as a newcomer, like a shy to ask for help a little bit, and also should I ask for help? Or is that gonna kind of come back at me a little bit, as in I'm the weaker student? And why I'm saying that is that imposition about the limited capabilities part. So I found that participants who heard that messaging a little more consistently could have been more hesitant to even try the English with me. So when they even asked me, like, do you want it in English or Arabic? I asked the question right back. I said, do you want it in English and Arabic? What if I make mistakes? I said, so what? I'm listening to you. Can I switch back and forth? Absolutely. I understand Arabic, so don't worry about that part, you know? So I think also an encouragement from me was a little bit driver. I'm not giving myself credit. I'm just saying I was an open space and a safe space for them to practice. So I think those are factors that I want to say I could attribute to that difference here. Yeah.
So that's very helpful. So using probably a variety of reasons. Some
Absolutely.
social desirability, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe I would look better, would be perceived better if I do this research in English.
Absolutely.
Maybe family influences to say, say practice English, do more of it. And maybe it's also about proficiency level with English, right? So that there are variability.
Yes.
That's very interesting because your research also suggests ability to speak Arabic is a huge part of their identity
Yes.
across the board,
Absolutely.
right? And yet that has connection with their comfort level with using English and Arabic.
Directly.
So
Yeah.
I just thought that's an interesting. That's why I was surprised how many choose to
Right.
have the interview in English.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is a future study. Maybe we can talk about that in the future. This is a future study.
Let's take care of this one first.
I know, right? Exactly. I know. In and of itself as a study, this is what I'm talking about. When I looked at my results, I'm like, holy, there's a lot of opportunity here.
Yeah.
So that's another in and of itself piece that I need to sit on as well. And I would love to kind of investigate that with their identity question as well. The ethnic, the racial identity. I feel like there was something that I can investigate more here.
Okay.
Let me say that. Yeah.
So let me give a second thought and question.
Sure.
Again, help me make sense of this. In your research, one of the statement you made was your conclusion is that the Canadian approach to integration is more of a assimilative
Yes.
approach. So that's the government policy based on your study.
Based on my study. Yes.
That means the force is trying to become Canadian, whatever that means, right? That's the priority, that's the important piece. At the same time, your participant is saying that one of the things that they really miss is the opportunity to engage with more non-Arab members. And they want more of that engagement, more the Canadian piece.
Absolutely.
So help me make sense of that contradiction or tension. Maybe it's just different levels of issue. So there's a force them to become more like Canadian.
Yes.
Then there's the participants say, but I want to be learning more about Canadian values, language, but the opportunity is not there. So what's going on there? Help me understand.
So, the assimilative approach that I'm feeling is more about the procedure, structurally, our prescription of how to be. This is what I had a struggle with. I feel like for every immigrant and refugee, it's almost like we have a guided paper of here is what success looks like, here are some values, here is what you need to do, etc. So the assimilative approaches is in the expectation of what to be, you know what I mean? And when I want to relate it, it's a difficult link, and I'm investigating it as I go, in my brain, even like while I'm studying. Their call for exposure is more about the actual cultural exchange piece. They don't want to give up part of who they are. They want to integrate some qualities that could balance themselves out with living as an Arab immigrant here. So I kind of took myself back, to be honest. Like, this is my active role in the research. I took back, Riham, what did you do when you came here at 14? Knows nothing about the Canadian culture, quote unquote, and what was that? Was it an assimilative or was it an integrative approach? So I feel like the assimilative is more embedded in the structural policy, social policy that guides our practice and gives a prescription. And I feel that the call is more for exposure to learn about it, not necessarily to, I want to say, adapt to that prescription. It's like I'm giving you medication, and I'm saying, Dr. Ko, here is your prescription, here's what you have to follow to be successful or healthy here. And that's, I think, where the two, kind of also come in tension with one another. I feel like they're kind of two pulling forces. There's not necessarily I want to say like an easy answer to that or a resolution to that. They kind of are ongoing, forces and tensions that need to be investigated more as an individual. Now, I will admit, those are newcomer participants. They've only been here, and I don't think I mentioned this, actually, I apologize, that they've only been here for 5 years. So I'm talking like maybe 5 other years from now, if I want to do a follow-up study with the same population, I would like to investigate that idea again. Have they actually felt like there's a bit of an assimilative, or was it more of an integrative approach to that? So I hope that answers a tiny bit of that.
Right, and if the time length.
Exactly.
Give them greater exposure to what they
Exactly.
are hungry for, right, or what they want to do
Yeah.
in terms of that exposure.
And it could do the opposite. It could be that, it could be that, yes, we might be actually pushing more of an assimilative narrative to them. So I wonder what the future would be like with those participants, It's
I have
great
a
time.
related question after this.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No worries.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Dr. Haronka.
Hey everybody, hey Riham. So happy to be here and excited for this time we have together.
Thank you. Too.
I also just want to say that this version, I can tell the amount of work that you've put into this piece of work, and I'm really proud of you for really in particular moving the analysis, strengthening the analysis in your discussion section. So I can tell that you have watching that process of learning and unlearning and relearning and that growth has been a privilege it's been a privilege to be a part of that and to see that your work just strengthen and strengthen as you progressed through your program of research. So that's the main thoughts that I have sort of for you today. I'm going to largely focus on the content in your discussion.
Okay.
Because I think that that's what's grown the most since last draft. So I'm going to first just ask you to reflect a little bit on what critical race theory has brought to your discussion or your I would call analysis, in particular talking about thinking through what your participants said about experiences of racism and that sort of content that you had around education, housing, and notions of gratitude.
So thank you for the question, and first let me say I owe my gratitude to all of you as my committee members for improving my documents. I appreciate your support with that too. When it comes to the critical race theory and what it has done, especially if I want to think about the racism and discrimination part, is that it really, for lack of a better description, it really brought me to reality, let me say. It made me fearless, let me say, to say, you know what, I think I need to not just look, I know that, for example, I know that the Arab population usually refers to ethnicity, but there's also a racial component in here. And that racial component is contextualized. I think that's what the critical race theory helped me do, is to contextualize when and where is something practiced. Is it, and I think you and I had that conversation, Dr. Branca, about Windsor, Essex versus London versus Toronto, It's, if I look at that same image in different cities, or Calgary even, I'm coming, Dr. Al-Ilahi, by the way, for vacation, that's for sure. I love Calgary. So let's say that, we look at immigrants in Calgary. I know Dr. Al-Ilahi is a pioneer in the work here, and look at Windsor, Essex. I mean, critical race theory, what it helps me do is to contextualize how and when something is practiced as an identity. So I felt like relating that identity to exposure to racism and discrimination was only possible through, I want to say, the critical race theory and concurrently with the intersectionality piece of things. So looking at also other elements such as even the transitional stage of emerging adulthood, What does that even mean? It's an industrialized product. It's a transitional stage. There's a lot of questions. There's a deviation away from the norm. What does that look like? I did ask myself the question of what is the norm to them, and how does that kind of expose them to racism or not. And that was a difficult, I'm gonna say, navigation when I was writing that discussion piece, especially about that part. When I say norm story, that means up to their actual identity practice, how they practice their identity. That was the question that I feel like it's still unresolved in my mind, and I want to investigate it a tiny bit more just as I think about it. But that was a big question that I had for myself. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, every answer is the right answer. That's all I want to
I'll
say.
try that. I'm right.
I'm gonna push you a little further around your critical race theory. You ask, I thought you did a really good job in your discussion around thinking through notions of gratitude and how folks who are often marginalized in all sorts of different ways, including folks who are coming here as immigrants or refugees, are expected to be grateful. And I thought you did a really, that was a great piece to your work. But I also noticed that there are still there's some sort of ingrained thinking around notions of success, and what constitutes success, and what makes a good citizen.
Yes.
That sort of emerges and reemerges in your work, sometimes critically, but sometimes reinforced as well. Generalizations around or just what does it mean to contribute? What do people need to contribute to work, to volunteer, to give back, all of that stuff. And so I think there is some work there around thinking how critical race theory can maybe unpack some thoughts, thinking around what constitutes a good citizen or just a good person,
I agree with you.
more broadly. I also just wanted to ask you, what has critical race, you did a really good job of integrating yourself into this work and understanding how your own experience, and you did a great reflexive practice. I wonder what critical race theory helped you yourself with. What did it teach you and the way that you think about your own and understand your own experience as you document through this process of becoming and continually becoming again and again?
Well, I will go back to the day that Dr. Park asked me to read about critical race theory, and I said, no more theories, Dr. Park, I cannot do this. And she's like, trust me, go read it and come back. And of course, as I always did, I trusted her with my journey. So I did read, and I came back and I said, wow, finally, it makes sense. Why did you not introduce me to this earlier, you know? And what that helped me with myself is that I think it helped me understand how I can be most, if not all, like a contributor to even that interaction about racism, the law on race, and how they interact to sustain structural differences and hierarchies. When I say a contributor, I felt like I'm an oppressor and I felt I'm oppressed. You know what I mean? And that's actually the biggest, I think, outcome of internalizing critical race theory when I have been conducting that. That was the biggest piece for me. It's liberating for someone like myself as well, that identifies as a lifelong refugee, you know? And what I mean by that term, if I can elaborate on that very briefly, is that I'm of a Palestinian ethnic background. So everywhere I went so far, I've been a refugee. Now, it just changed from a stateless back in Saudi Arabia to Canadian citizen here. But now I'm questioning even my Canadian citizenship, learning about the experiences of our indigenous communities and the colonialism that we contributed with. So it helped me also assume responsibility as a citizen, you know, to my community, to my people. That's what it is. It helped me bravely say, I am an oppressor. I'm sitting on your rent, but I'm also oppressed in this case 1, 2, or 3. So that's what role it had with me, I want to say.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, you.
Great, thank you. Okay, Dr. Grant.
Hi, Riham.
Dr. Grant.
So your document was, like everyone has said, so much improved and so much depth in your analysis. I was really, really impressed. Equally impressed by your fantastic presentation. Great job. Really, really well done.
Thank you so much.
Riham, I have a question to ask you that's just sort of personal, just because I can't be there right now. Do you have any of your family there?
I do, they're all here. I have my dad, my mom, my sisters, and my uncles too.
Fantastic. Good. I'm glad to hear that. It's great. I'm glad they're here for this moment. So, Riham, I'm going to ask you a question actually about your data analysis.
Okay, go ahead.
So I notice in your document that sometimes you use the language of thematic analysis, and then other times you were using the language of grounded theory. And so I wondered if you could, first of all, talk about the difference between those two approaches to data analysis, and then talk about if you think grounded theory has influenced your thematic analysis in some way, and if so, how?
Okay, so I would say, well, the difference I understand, let me start with that. The difference I understand between like thematic analysis and grounded theory. I feel like grounded theory, if I would have applied that lens, it would have been a lot less structured in how I even begin to navigate my data analysis. Or even maybe even like going back to my methodology, how I would even begin with my questions. I felt I had more ideas than what a grounded theory would allow me to apply, let me say, and that's what kind of driven me to the phenomenology and then the thematic analysis. When it comes to the thematic analysis piece, I think Brown and Clark, and I'm ready for that question, by the way, the why Brown and Clark, and I answered it. That was a question I really wanted to navigate and ask myself that, you know? So basically, I think with the thematic analysis piece, when I kind of investigated with Brown and Clark, I found that some traces or some elements from the grounded theory could be also embedded in how I apply thematic analysis, and maybe that's why you felt that in my document. But with the thematic analysis piece is that I think the basically my active lens, like recognizing that as a researcher, I'm not going there as a blank slate at all. I have some preconceived notions, ideas, lenses. My glasses that I read the document are different. There are something I'm looking for, I'm digging for. So I think the grounded theory helped me kind of, you know, maybe elements of it, I shouldn't say the grounded theory, elements of it probably helped me kind of go back and be as pure as can be, to go back again, to invest myself in that data analysis. And that became more struggling with every layer of analysis. I think I want to say safely, I did 4 or 5 times at least as a beginning to go back to my data and purely say, what do you see here, Riham? What do you understand here, Riham? And then going back to that. So I hope I answered that. And again, this is something I would love to continue working on, to improve on as well as a researcher in the future.
That was a great answer. And I don't think it's something you necessarily need to improve on. I just wanted to understand sort of how you saw it.
Thank you so much.
One other quick question, if I have time. So I feel so fortunate to have been on this journey with you, not just your doctoral journey, but prior to that. And I wondered if you could talk about, so one of the pleasures for me right now is seeing you. That's why I'm glad your family's here. Seeing you in this moment, just doing it, just slaying it, shall we say? And so I wanted to ask you, what is one of the major ways that you have seen growth in yourself as an academic throughout this journey?
Well, I always tell you, Dr. Brent, it's your fault I'm here. Remember when I said that? At the MSW part, I cannot forget, and my mother actually, if I could use a personal component here, my mother keeps on telling me, Jill said you have to do this, so you have to do this. So when you were the faculty member evaluating my MSW and taking me from not, what I absolutely loved about that is that you have asked me, to take home with me my research interests. So if you look back at my MSW poster, it's not so much different from what I'm doing today. And I think that's what helped me grow as an academic, that commitment to who I am, commitment to what I'm interested in is a key piece. They say, but don't believe them, that I became less short-tempered, a little bit of temper there. But you know what? This is what comes with research. That's the process. And I think academically, what I found as well, that it's okay to say it's okay to be with faculty that are so accepting and so supporting to, I have a different idea. And that was, I think, one of my biggest, I will admit, like when I first started my journey, I told Dr. Park, I'm like, is it okay if I tell a committee member, maybe I want to do this a little bit different? Like, does that work, And I can attest that all of you have allowed me to do that. So I say I'm the one who is privileged, because arguably I always say I have the best committee ever. I'm so lucky because you all housed me and you housed who I am. You did not let me shed any part of my identity, more so you let me solidify it a little bit more. And that's what I learned, I think, across the years. I learned how to be direct. I learned how to speak to my ideas. I learned that sometimes my brain races a lot, and a lot of thoughts are here and I need to make them on paper, so that's a growing in progress. But I'm happy to see where you have actually put me together to be here today. It's not me, I'm not the product, I'm the product of you. That's how I feel. And that's our definition of success. We never attribute it to an individual. It has to be to a community of people. So that's what I'm seeing here today. So thank you for that question.
Thanks, Riham.
Wow.
They're cheering too. I'm trying not to.
She schooled me.
Please pay back a little bit. I'm just kidding.
Dr. Park, would you care to follow that?
Wow, I know.
Actually, a couple of my committee members already stole my question. So, they took my question, so I don't really have the first question I was going to ask, but I wanted to ask you, because I've been working with you over the years, so I'm so proud of you now, and I get really emotional.
Me too. Trying not to.
I'd like to ask you a question about the gender role. And you mentioned about the traditional Arab woman's role here. And Arab women are subject to greater responsibility in preserving their families' reputation and honor than men. Okay, so now you are here, really successful Arab woman. Now you've been living here for how many years?
20 plus right now.
So,
Right? 20 plus? I'm trying to
20
think.
plus years,
Yeah.
and getting your PhD here. How does that work? Is it your success and your achievement, is it considered to honor your family as a woman in a traditional way? Or is it considered now beyond this gender role here? We are all here in Canada, so it's a different approach, family accepting, and then so I'm just curious, how is it going to be perceived by your parents and your family members?
I'm sorry that I get emotional a little bit because this is really, thank you. This is really hitting home for me. So I remember at 12 years of age, I went to my dad screaming. He's right here, so he knows that. And I said, I cannot live here anymore. We need to get out. I need to do something about me and my sisters. I don't see us here. So at 12 years of age, and being the nagging self that I am a very stubborn person. I will have to admit that, just don't take it too much home. But when I say stubborn, I actually came up with a term through one of my clients. I called it stubborn determination. That's the term that defines me. I am a very determined woman. I feel like as a gender, I need to be looked at differently. Not just because I'm in Canada, because Canada allowed me to explore other opportunities. I mean, I will admit, it's very liberating here compared to what I was in Saudi Arabia, but that has nothing to do with it. I think it starts right with my home, you know, my dad and my mom. So this is why I honor, well, my mom, I tease my mom a little bit that I favor dad a little bit more, but it's okay. But it's his payback, you know, like he came here, he left an entire universe behind him. So many criticisms up until our day today, but I'm so proud of him for who he is today, and he's here. So I have to attribute my success to him and to my mother. Of course, my sisters who have been like dealing with my short temper and all that I speak about, but they were there to kind of push me beyond the fights that I had to do. So I think what I learned over the years is that life is so difficult. There are so many fights to navigate, but I made it. You know, I made it to today. So I'm so sorry. I'm trying not to get emotional. Riham, seriously. But I love something I really value, and I think everyone here should value, is the integration of being human, humor, laughter, emotions, cries. I mean, I also still remember like when I went to Dr. Hakim Luxon in my 2007 class, believe it or not, and I was like, can I do something here? And you told me like, Riham, I see you in my shoes one day. So, you know, I go to Dr. Cole and we have 2-hour conversations. We're like, how did the 2 hours pass here? We're talking about life, diversity, education. What does that mean? I go to all of your offices. It's the same thing. So I think I'm very fortunate, and I have to say that this is what the redefined gender female role that we need to look at in the Arab world. It made it possible for me, but it's not just Canada, it's my home as well. My home made it possible for me, let me say that. So yeah, hey, I'm good. I'm okay now. Sorry, the makeup is gone today.
Okay, well, why don't we start a second round?
Sure.
So I'll return to Dr. Al-Lahib. Have you got any more questions for Riham? I'm sorry.
That's
Riham.
okay, don't worry. It's Riham if that helps a little
Riham.
bit.
Well, congratulations on finishing the first round, and hello family. You need to be congratulated as well, because this is a family project usually.
That's right.
So I want to go back to the theory piece, and here I'm looking for you to tease out some of the tensions that you went through in your writing process. One of the privileges of being an external examiner is to only have the final product. So when we talk about Arab culture, it's not one monolithic culture. There is so many different differences and cultural contradictions sometimes. So one of the issues or the questions that I have for you to tease out is how do you negotiate? How did you negotiate that in your research? The piece around representing Arab cultures and the diversities in ways that do not reproduce Orientalist or colonial understanding of the Arab identity, one, and two, how did you negotiate the piece around avoiding valorizing Canada as a savior country, right? Those tensions, and how critical race theory helped you manage that in your research process, if you don't mind me asking.
Not at all, for sure. So I want to say early in the process, I think most of my work has actually come when it comes to the critical race theory and unpacking, let me say, the Arab diverse identity, is that that was actually, well, sorry, let me take myself back a little bit. initially in composing this project together, I was fully aware that there's a homogeneous picture of what an Arab immigrant is. Associations that are exacerbated with a religious background is just one example, not just the only example I want to say. So when I first initiated the idea behind, like when I proposed this study to my committee, that was one of the biggest goals that I wanted to highlight. The fact that we need to deviate away from that homogeneity of looking at the Arab while they're practicing themselves in a colonial Canada. Now, when it comes to the writing process, I will admit, I think most of that work happened after my progress meeting back in March that I had with my committee, where they noticed as well that I was even afraid to embed myself in that data analysis and be like, you know what, there is something beyond what they're telling you as an Arab. There's something beyond what you're telling us here in your story. So I think most of that unpacking happened from the fact, well, driven of course by the encouragement that I had to liberate myself. That's what I say, like I know I've repeated this word a lot, but I really feel a lot of liberation from critical race theory in that it basically, I kind of like went back even to its origin. Like I went back and read the Crenshaw article, see what she did. Like she looked at the experiences of Black women, racialized and oppressed group in the United States. And United States though, it's more like overt, it's more out to the world. So I felt, okay, this is gonna be a challenge to do here in Canada, because in Canada, it's so, we do it nicely. we racialize nicely, as I call it. So I even asked a question while I was discussing with my committee about, we run away from even asking the person, well, what is your race? And my question is why? Why are we running away from that? There's something in that question that helps us also respond to the embedded structural oppressions that we even carry as colleagues or as community members or as academics, as researchers when we conduct a study on Arab immigrants. A lot of discussion happened on unpacking that Arab immigrant piece. And I should say, I owe even attribute or owe to Dr. Hakim Larson, because you study the Arab immigrant groups and a lot, and in our research group we talk about that a lot. So I've undertaken some of those ideas to see how I can actually come back to my research and say, the Arab identity is not just this, I can't just put a one definition to it. Like even what I presented today in my lit review is just to give an idea, I feel. Because I'm sure you and I, Dr. Al-Haib, will know, we come from, for example, in different countries, but we come from our history, we come from our lived experience, we come from our family. So that's, I think, where I was really able to, let me say, unpack this Arab identity beyond that. Thank you.
Great answer. Do you still have time?
Yes, you do.
Yeah. And my follow-up question is, how did you relate to the experience of your participants as they are trying to survive their identity process and their migration status or refugee status in Canada, without falling into the trap of comparing between here and there, which is a colonial framework that valorizes here is always better, right? The West is the best.
Yeah.
So can you tease those tensions a little bit for me too?
For sure. So the way that I have actually done it a little bit more is that I was trying to look for the celebratory elements that they have. So I was trying to see, I wanted to we all know what the challenges of acculturation is. We all know the challenges that come with immigration, but I think I had a little bit of that lens of, well, what have we done well as well? And what have they done well to actually perceive and accept what we're almost like prescribing to them or supporting them with? So I really wanted to see what is celebratory about their identity. So when I was asking my probing questions, I didn't probe, I promise, for either direction. But when they started talking about, I learned this, I did this, and I did that, I asked 3 words. Tell me more. That's all I said. And the story just unfolded in front of my eyes. So when I came to the write-up piece, this is where like my discussion, I hope, did justice to that we need to celebrate. We need to help them celebrate as well, who they are and how they are. Language is only one example, but language is, yes, we all know the language barriers and differences in the role, but I looked at language as a process as well. What does it mean that I speak Arabic? And I went back to myself too, and I even gave the example. Listen, there's not one job that I had that didn't use my Arabic. So that says something, that speaks volumes to me. I hope actually to do more of that work with either like this group or more like longitudinally to also promote and support that piece. Like looking and teasing out, I'm gonna use your word, teasing out the celebratory parts of being here without just prescribing to, thank you for letting me be here, thank you for letting me be here. Enough of that. There's nothing that requires a gratitude here. They are coming here, they're contributing, they're citizens. We are working alongside them. We need to though look into what is purely unique and contributing to that group and what can they bring to diversify and strengthen our society, I want to say.
Great answer, thank you.
Thank you so much, appreciate you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Dr. Hakeem Larson.
Yes, thank you. So this is kind of a nice follow-up to that, the celebratory part, because that's really part of my next question for you. One of the things I really enjoyed was the fact that you were able to bring together a lot of great ideas that your participants brought to you. And one of the things I'm hoping that maybe when you write this up for publication, that you will work on distilling those ideas and kind of just really giving them a big punch because they're just really important. So one of the things I kind of hope from what you were saying, and this is part of the celebratory part, is what the positive values are that were mentioned. And you mentioned quite a few of them.
Yes.
The hospitality, generosity, supporting and helping other people as being part of the values, paying back to Canadian culture and community. And I think that is actually part of that whole gratitude piece. It's part of the Arab values as well, that you receive something, you have to give back.
Right.
And so that's part of the cultural value. I know you don't want it to go too far, like you were saying a moment ago, but I also think that is something to be celebrated. That these are positive values that are kind of common in many Arab communities and cultures.
Exactly.
So I think that this kind of now contrasts to the fact that you also think that there's feelings of racism and discrimination that weren't brought forward enough, right? And part of this could be because of their youth, part of it, like you said, could be because they're not experienced enough interacting in Canadian communities. Part of it just might be ignorance of the bigger picture in Canada and the politics. So I'm just wondering about that. Could it be because there's like a tenuous Canadian identity in young people? They don't really know their full identity yet. Could that be why they're not ready to look at microaggressions more directly?
I see. I think that has, in my perspective, that plays a good part of it. Being a transitional stage and like just recency of that experience as well. I believe those are two elements that are factored in that. I wonder, however, if it's kind of a little bit beyond that, if I want to kind of put on my ecological perspective a little bit more, and I wonder if it's actually a systemically contributed process of only presenting the dominant narrative of Canada being welcoming. So I was even asked, I think, by my committee, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was in the March meeting, that You know, do they even know that there's colonialism? Or do they even know that there's oppressions and discrimination? Now, directly, no. I don't know that they know that. I have not even heard it. I will actually validate that with the fact that none of them even mentioned, for example, like the experiences of what's it called, like the discrimination and the killing of the family in London, for example, or the other incident that happened with like a Muslim Arab community. I was struck by that, and I think Dr. Ko, you asked me that question too, right? Exactly. So I wonder if it was also, and this is something I have not investigated, I'll admit, there's sometimes a fear in immigrants and refugees that if they were to say something is wrong, that they might be escorted back to where they come from. This is a very common idea. I think I'm seeing a lot of nods from our practitioners here. So I myself had that idea for a minute, you know, until I got the citizenship and even beyond when I settled here. So I wonder if the fact that that part is missing is attributed directly to that. Something to investigate for sure.
I think, like I said,
Yeah.
the tenuous Canadian identity, that
Yes.
you're not sure you really belong yet.
Yeah.
And so you don't wanna rock the boat too much.
And actually,
Yeah.
one of my participants said that to me. If you ask me, because I asked them, what do you understand about the Canadian community or culture, sorry, I should say. What did I say? What does Canadian mean to you? That was my question to them. Purely, it was that. And one of my participants said, wow, I don't even know what that can, maybe it means poutine. Maybe it means like they started, you know, using the simple, what they know, right, about this. He's like, there are too many people here coming from too many places for me to even say or know what does a Canadian mean.
Yeah.
So that was him, and he kind of struck me with that. I started laughing, obviously, when he said poutine. I said, I don't really, oh, he said Tim Hortons. I said, now we're friends. Tim Hortons, yes. Coffee, we all know this is my friend over here. So I think that too kind of plays a part. The fact that our diversity is our strength, but also our diversity is a struggle too. So we need to kind of, I think, be aware and almost like be fluid between the two processes here. Yeah, I hope that answers
Yeah, oh yeah.
that
And
here.
I just wanted you to be, I think that's one of the things you need to distill and
Absolutely.
put forward in really tight language at some point for people who are reading it. I have one more item that I was going to ask about your participants. Did you have the sense that any of them actually came from an ethnic enclave? Like, are there such enclaves in the Windsor Essex community where there's just a big neighborhood that's all people of the same ethnic background? And did some of your participants come from that? And then the follow-up part of that is, you talked a little bit about there being a tension between having a supportive community and opportunities to make new friends outside of that community.
Correct.
So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that
For sure.
your participants.
So that part was very interesting. So my sample, as you saw, was like dominated by the Syrian community. There were some ethnic enclaves that I kind of sensed there, but there was equally this also like struggles with the community as well. So there are still the conflicts within the present ethnic community here. Overall, there is a supportive sense to it. There is like a little like gatherings and I can help you to find out kind of thing.
Do they live in the same neighborhood?
Yes, I
They
want to
do.
say some of them do. Now, interestingly, if I kind of move up this scale, quote unquote, of national backgrounds, when I looked at like my Palestinian or my Lebanese, the Lebanese had a little hub. It was very interesting. And then the Iraqis had a little bit of, I want to say, a division, a little bit between Chaldean, Christian, something different. I haven't fully navigated that yet. Interestingly, the only part that I felt they were really a strong ethnic enclave here were the Kurdish Syrians. And that's an identity piece or an acculturation even of the Kurdish Syrians, I think needs its own study there. Because they did experience like direct aggressions and oppressions back home. So Canada was liberating to them to even practice their identity. So they started even celebrating their holidays. When I did like my members check-in piece, one of them was speaking to me about what the holiday is, like the Nowruz and all of that. So I sensed that there was some of that. when it comes to the second part of your question, I think you asked me about the, there was one thing that you asked me here about the follow-up question. In terms of their, the relationship with the ethnic community here and making friendships, that's the
Making friendships
Yes,
outside of that community.
exactly. So that piece I felt like was really struggling because of like limited opportunities. I cannot deny the impact of COVID, of course. My study took place in COVID too, so there was a lot of, like, my colleagues from the settlement agencies will speak to that too. Like, there was a lot of closures of programs and, you know, opportunities and all of that. So I wonder if that had part of it. Not the primary part, but I think there was also a little bit of like a fear, you know, of like, you know, how much can I even, do they accept me? Because some of my participants interestingly said, they refer to Canadians as foreigners. That's the term they use, and I think I defined it, I hope, in my document. I did define that. So that also fear of like foreigners don't really like to mix with Arabs. There was one participant that told me that. And I asked that participant to reflect a little bit or tell me more. Again, those three key words. And what he said is that they are fearful of us, you know, kind of thing. I'm like, why do you think so? What makes you think so? I think we are different. Our cultural values of this and that and being with family and all that, it might be kind of perceived as a threat to even forming friendships. So that's another piece that I felt like, I think they're still developing on that. So I'm pretty sure I'll find more about that if I were to study the same group, I want to say like 5 other years from today. Yeah, that's what my thoughts are here.
I guess one of the things I was thinking about since I come from Michigan is
Yeah.
that in Dearborn, you have, in Michigan, huge neighborhoods that are all people from the same ethnic, similar ethnic background. And I just wondered if there was something similar to that in
I see.
Windsor, Essex. And I have the sense that some, but not as much.
Not as much, no.
And
It's
I
not.
think
It's
that
not a
that-
Dearborn for sure.
I think that there would be some differences with
Yeah.
neighborhood density of people in terms of their community versus where people who are scattered and just come together at their church or mosque and that's it.
Actually, that kind of rings a bell to me. One of my participants said, like, we all gather at church, we all meet at church, and then once we're out, we're out.
That's right,
You
that's
know?
another thing. I
That was the
remember
one.
reading
There
that.
you go.
Right.
Exactly. So yeah, I don't know that it's to that level.
I think that that's just,
Some-
I'm just highlighting it for you
Yeah.
because I think
Thank
it's another
you.
important point for you to distill. You're distilling information from your dissertation that I think are really good points.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you for that, and definitely, you know, work on that too in the future. Thanks.
Great. Okay, Dr. Wu.
Okay, all right. So my next question, Riham, for you, directed at you, what you have discussed in your discussion section, particularly about the implication for social work practice.
Yeah.
And so on page 243, I'm just going to read what you have written, and then I'm going to build my question on that. Okay, you don't have to read it. I'll read it for you.
You read it for me? Okay.
So-
Thank you.
As demonstrated in the study, the Arab, get to page 243. As demonstrated in this study, Arab native language serves more than a mode of communication. It is also an element of preservation of Arab ethnicity and identity. Accordingly, bilingualism should be extended beyond proficiency in English and French. And here's the implication of social work. Social workers should promote and support bilingualism and preservation of immigrants and refugees' native language as a goal rather than a barrier. So I wanted to, I'm not particularly familiar with social work, but here is the things to consider, and I want you to speak to that. The previous paragraph you have showed that it's a positive thing if the emerging adult can maintain their proficiency in Arabic. And that's a very big part of their identity. We know that from the literature, not only Arabic, but also other groups. So the recommendation here is for practitioners to promote, to encourage multicultural, multilingualism, now I'm putting my researcher head at the same time. Are there evidence in your study to show that for those who do not keep up or trying to not maintain their Arabic proficiency was experiencing negative impact? Do you need me to rephrase that again? Were there evidence,
Just the last
negative
part, I
evidence?
think. Yeah, the negative evidence as in like to preserve their,
For
their
those
Arabic,
who
what was it?
don't want to.
Oh, for those who don't want to.
Because what you were saying is if
Okay.
they preserve it,
Got it.
it's good for them.
Yeah.
It's going to contribute to their well-being and identity. But were there any the evidence is otherwise?
I
Other direction?
I think the risk with that is actually directly related to their interrelation with the local ethnic community. The interactions and forming friendships and maintaining that sense of community with their Arabic community.
Okay.
So they could choose to deviate from that, but that could also mean an isolation piece from that, is what I'm sensing a little bit here. So
Is
why?
that your prediction, or was that what they're saying to you?
Partly, I want to say a few have said to me that, like,
Okay.
we need to, because if I don't speak Arabic, then I can't really be with my community. I cannot, this is how they communicate to me, and I also want to support them back, kind of thing. I think maybe the sample also I had is very committed as well to their, the Arab ethnicity. That would be something maybe to kind of explore further, but I sense from them like they kind of felt like if they give it up, they're gonna give up not just their identity, their relations with their Arab culture, there can be like emerging conflicts with their own families of like, oh my gosh, my tradition, our heritage, don't lose that. That's the common fear that
Okay.
we see in immigrant populations. Could be an active decision, it could lead to an isolation, I wanna say. Is what I sensed a tiny bit, not so much I will admit, but something to explore as well.
The reason I'm asking that
Yeah.
is, on the one hand, when I read that, I said, yes, it makes sense.
Mhm.
As a researcher, I'm asking, is that a value statement, or is it the evidence-based statement? You see my distinction?
Yes,
Okay?
I do,
Because that's important.
True,
In
true.
this document, I wanted to see evidence,
Mhm.
which you have a great, very rich evidence supporting one direction. Were there other evidence that support the contrary? Either yes or the absent.
Mm.
If there's been absence of suggesting that those who, now we're putting our opinion aside, just looking at data,
Purely.
to say, well, all those have suggested that, maintaining our language is important for them, and seems to be very good for them. But there's no other evidence, or there has been evidence to suggest that, no, that's not really important to me. It doesn't impact me any other way.
Mm.
Then I think you need to bracket
Mhm.
this conclusion. Okay, so the value or
Versus
evidence-based.
yeah. Okay. Thinking back, I want to say from my recollection, I will admit, I don't know that I had a direct evidence base for the counterpart. Like, I don't know, I think that primarily my participants, again, were like really committed to preserving that Arabic. I'm thinking back to one quote. One participant said to me, he said something along the lines of like, I'm at so-and-so high school and they all speak English and no one speaks Arabic, and that was really good for me because I need to develop. So that kind of contradicted the common voice I heard there. I think that's the only quote I can kind of see myself or see it in my data. Yeah, I don't know that I had an evidence for the opposite per se without that particular exception, but it was kind of like more of an embedded talk of like, I need to keep my Arabic because, there was a lot
Implied.
of that. Yeah,
Rather than
implied
stated.
meaning, and then, not the direct statement, more so about an implied meaning in what they're telling me, yeah.
So related to that, okay, I'm not particularly asking you to give me an answer, because I just want you to think about that.
Yeah, of course.
Because bracketing is incredibly important. Well, data research, right? Bracket is this your opinion, or is this, you are informed by what the participant tells you? And relatedly, back to the social work piece.
Yeah.
And this is sometimes, when I'm talking to students about this, is that this statement suggests multiculturalism, biculturalism is a positive thing. Bilingualism is a positive thing for immigrants. Is it social workers' job to promote, encourage Arab youth to be more bicultural or integrated? Is that the sort of the pinnacle? Is that the goal? Is it professional social workers' job? Is it psychologist's job?
Wow, great question. Okay. I think it is part of our responsibility as social workers, and I'll tell you why. So we are, I'm gonna again kind of mix my researcher and practitioner here a little bit. So I feel like we are always committed to, I guess, digging deep, let me say, and getting out from our client / participant what they have engraved in them as values that are important to them. And I feel like also as a social worker, it's my responsibility to also attune to the fact that the product of what they practice as their identity or their acculturation, I should say, here in Canada, is not a sole product of who they are or what they're doing. It's a mix of things. There are so many layers here. So I see the integrated layers between our policies, you know what I mean, like the even practices, social pressures of what and who should I be, are also embedded factors here. So I feel like as a social worker, if I felt the hesitation in maintaining one's, like let's say their ethnic language, whatever that mother tongue language is, I feel like I owe them that responsibility to embrace it and actually almost like dig it and get it out of them to say, you know what, this is not something to be, I'm gonna quote this, like ashamed of. This is something to actually bring up, and here is how. Maybe we can use a practical example. So let's say, like as an Arabic-speaking person, I use myself as an example to my Arabic-speaking clients. And I say, look, I use my Arabic here, there, here, here, here. So how do you see the Arabic helping you or struggling you, or sorry, challenging you, I meant to say. And we start having that navigating conversation. So as a social worker, to actually bring myself to support the holistic, approach that we always assume in our practice, I think part of it also is encouragement of, bringing forward who they are. So that's how I see it as a social worker.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
For that response.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, Doctor. Okay, Dr. Veronka.
Hi again, everyone.
Hi.
I'm going to get a little nitpicky too, and I'm going to go into the discussion, your discussion section, and just read a couple sentences that you wrote, and then I'm going to query or invite you to query these statements that you're making. And this relates back to Dr. Park's sort of probing around gender.
Okay.
Okay. So here we are on page 215. This is a section where you're talking about intersectionality, and you state, in terms of gender, besides the gender distribution consisting mostly of females, there are no other noted intersectional differences between the two genders. To my surprise, there were no gender differences among participants in their perception and understanding of acculturation. So when I read this, and I'll just read, like, to my surprise, there were no gender differences among participants in their perception and understanding of acculturation. And so when I read that, I was like, that is a bold statement.
Yeah.
Wow, that is
Little
a
direct.
very deep, bold, committed, absolute sort of conclusion that I'm not convinced that you are equipped to make. So I just want to bring that forward to you and maybe just hear your thoughts around that and what sort of led you to writing that.
So I think this one I kind of went back to and related related to my literature review, which highly informs that there are the gender differences usually between a female and a male, and how they, like, even they choose to acculturate, the responsibilities of a female, and etc. So I think that's why I kind of used the word to my surprise, because I was surprised to be like, I was really surprised to not know like a primary difference. I mean, that's what I kind of intended, I guess, to say with that statement. Maybe it's a little bit of a stronger statement, maybe something to look at again for sure, absolutely. But what I was trying to describe with it is that I you know, like, I think I don't know if it's related to, again, like a concept of like looking at the, like, specifically the female gender differently, and what contributes to like the acculturation or how it's practiced here. So I was kind of going back and forth between the lit review and going back to say, are you sure there are no gender differences here? You know, I kind of asked myself that question a lot, and I struggled with it, I will admit to you. So I hope I'm getting to that.
I guess my question, I would say, like, you should be looking at what people said to you. And my question, I guess, is, like,
Yeah.
did you actually do a gender-specific analysis looking at whether, you know, I mean, my question, I guess, is, like, did you actually methodologically do the work of analyzing your data to make sure that every person, like, there were no differences of acculturation based on gender? Like, I don't know if you did that. I wouldn't, like, and if you did, then you might be able to like, you might be able to get to that conclusion. But I think we would actually have to see some of that analysis of your own interviews and like what people said to you before getting to that conclusion. I wouldn't get to that conclusion based on what other literature said. I mean, that would, this is maybe I'm being like, this is like homing
No,
in
that's
on
great,
something.
it's very helpful, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, something to think about. That's it from me.
Okay, thank you, appreciate you. I'll think about that again though, for sure. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Dr. Grant.
Thank you. I just want to pick up on what Dr. Bronco was talking, because I had highlighted that as well. And I think it's an example of still some of the language being used being much more quantitative than qualitative, right? I agree, you're not in a position to make that claim. So I think it's a matter of softening up that language, and there are several other places where I would suggest that happened, right? So yeah, just a comment on that. Riham, you recommended some policy changes.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear your opinion on who should drive those policy changes.
Okay. This is, I think it would be hard to start at the top down. I think we need to go community up. And I'm saying that carefully because I feel like if, you know, like if we're gonna start at the federal level per se, you know, we're going to kind of maintain those like kind of the dominant practices, policies, and narratives that they want to maintain. There's a political agenda to that, you know what I mean? So I feel like, and I don't know, it is more of a difficult route, and I don't mean to put the responsibility on us as a community. I feel like though collaboratively at the kind of like more local level, we can start something up. Like, you know how, as I call it in simpler terms, like shake the system a little bit. I'm not sure how, and I know I recognize it's difficult, and I'm very careful to say that because I don't want to put the responsibility on us. But I think a call to action can start here, you know what I mean? Because if I were to just, I'm gonna quote it, put the responsibility on the federal level, for example, like, or the larger hierarchical structural levels, I mean, their goal is to probably maintain the status quo and keep everything the same. So if I want to shake the system, maybe the call to action can start with even something like the entity we have here, like as the Windsor Essex Local Immigration Partnership, you know? We have multiple projects and we go project by project to action that. So that's how we call it. We start with a goal and how to action that goal. I think practically that could be a good start in my perspective.
Thank you very much. So related to that, and I'm putting some things together that might not flow in other people's minds, but you know, one of the most important topics of discussion is the assimilated neoliberal values that were so evident in some of your participants. And I started to think about policy change in Canada that is a colonial country so firmly rooted in those neoliberal values. And I just wondered, you know, if you could see a way, and of course it's idealistic, but that's what we do as a short, a way for the community, if you're starting at the community level, for the community to learn from some of the values that your participants might have brought with them from home that perhaps don't fit clearly, but might be the way to challenge some of the ways we do things.
Yeah, I mean, actually that brings me home to something that I don't think I shed a light enough today on, which is, it really kind of resonated with me, like that collective sense of collective role of success, collective vision of success. That will come directly contradictory sometimes to the values that we engrave here. As in, I will use myself as an example today. I mean, I'm surrounded by my family, my friends, my colleagues, and all that. And I have a point to that, to be honest with you, that you know, like as a housing community, we need to start looking at, you know, more of a collective sense of being, collective form of success, and not look at it as a threat to who we are as the Canadian colonial individualist society. I mean, I think there are a lot of, I have a feeling, and I'm not at liberty to do that today, obviously, but I have a feeling that, you know, we have a lot of lessons learned, especially in the recent history from the indigenous community's experience. And I think if I want to relate the Arab experience to the indigenous community experience and what we're trying to do with that, I feel it could be a good start. Like, you know how, for example, like the land acknowledgement is just a one statement that I'm saying I acknowledge. But we had a big discussion, my colleagues and I, in a committee meeting the other day about, should we even do the land acknowledgement statement? What does that even mean? Am I honoring the person who is different from me? I think that's how I see, you know, myself working with that idea and notion. I think we need to start looking at it beyond the competition and more as a coexistence. How? It's going to be difficult. Let's face it, we're a really highly diverse community. And we're probably the most diverse, if we want to say globally maybe. There is a lot of worlds and histories and perspectives that are being brought to one land. So for us to coexist, we need to start to look at ourselves, or each other I should say, sorry, not as a competition, but as a collaborator. And that's, I think, what we have not arrived at, we have not achieved yet in our communities. That's why we're struggling, I feel. I hope that responds to that question.
Yep, thank you very much. That's it for me.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Dr. Park.
Yes, I have a very concrete question to you. You have your colleagues here, and then also you mentioned briefly. So you have many different recruitment strategies.
Correct.
Do you know actually participants where the recruitment sources are?
The recruitment sources?
Yes.
So
How many people was by the video, or how many people from your Facebook,
yeah.
or
I have some relative numbers, that's for sure. So what I did, I targeted recruitment from multiple sources. I want to say through the WELIP was the primary partner, because WELIP is an entity. It's like a I want to say an entity, for lack of a better term, that houses like close to 100 agencies. That was my biggest partner in that the dissemination of that idea. I still did have some participants on the less part, but it was not absent from I created my Facebook group, if that's your question, and then the Instagram group. And I had some direct messages to say, we want to participate in your study. Now, the beauty of that is I tried as well to be the direct contact first, because that was another discussion I had, I think with Dr. Grant, about how to recruit and who should be the recruiter. So all what was shared, I guess, was like, here are the study information, do you want to participate? But I was intentionally wanting to be the primary contact, because I didn't want yet another layer for them. I wanted to be that direct contact for twofold. One, the comfort, and two, my possible dual relationship, because I'm an active person and I'm active practitioner in the community. So I was very careful with that, so that helped me navigate that process too.
So my question was that, do you have any sense how many people actually coming from daily referral versus group approach on Facebook? Do you have any sense? Did you ask that question?
Yes, I have it actually in my database for sure. I'm trying to think back to my database, and I think I had probably 5 from the Facebook, 2 or 3 from Instagram. The rest were I had about close to 8, 9-ish from the cultural groups and community agencies, because I targeted that too, like religious and cultural agencies here, and then the rest were from WeLib. So mostly WeLib, then community, cultural and religious groups, Facebook, Instagram. That's how it went. Yeah.
Was there anybody who contacted you through Facebook or Instagram? They follow with you, or they want to engage more conversations with you after you finish your interview?
Not necessarily. I think I don't recall that part. I had the ones, 2 from the WeLib part of things that wanted to know where the study has went. And obviously, like, all my participants know that it's going to be available, like my dissertation will be available and all that. So I said, stay tuned, basically, for that. But otherwise, no, I don't think I had any questions following that.
So do you have also have contact information of your participants so that you can go back to them with your
Yes.
results?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so have you done that, or are you planning to do, where does this?
I contacted quite a few with the member checking phase. Like unfortunately it wasn't as successful as I wanted to be. Like I wanted to get to more people in that phase. But I got a few that responded either like they wanted the follow up with a phone call or an email. Other than that, no, I wouldn't say so. My plan is I have all of their email addresses as well, so my plan is when the dissertation is like online and available, I was gonna say like a thank you basically, and here's the link to the dissertation basically. Yeah, that's the plan I have for that. Dissemination wise, I have with WeLib one of the meetings, the council meetings I'm going to be presenting, because that's part of the dissemination plan, as well as the diversity committee at the City of Windsor level as well. And we'll go from there, I guess, if it gets asked. I should say, actually, thank you to Jana. Through the SWIP, social workers in private practice have also asked for like a mini presentation about my dissertation when it's published and available. So we're gonna probably do that in the new year as well. Yeah.
Great, you have a plan.
I do, I do. There is a plan for sure. Thank you for that, Dr. Park. Appreciate you.
Okay, so at this point, we've done 2 full rounds, and I'm looking at the time, and I think we could do a speed round for the committee if there are any lingering issues, but really quick. And if there are no lingering questions, we could open it up to all of the supporters of Riham today. So, Dr. El-Lahib, have you got anything else you'd like to ask? Okay, I like the thumbs up. Dr. Hakim Larson.
I'm good.
Okay, Dr. Quote. Okay, Dr. Veronka. She's good. Dr. Grant.
All good, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Park.
No question.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to all of you.
My thanks to the committee. So at this point, if you've got any questions you'd like to ask, now's your chance, if you haven't already over the years.
For sure. Okay, go ahead.
I have one.
That you are doing, sorry, my voice may be a little bit low. But my question to you, what is your next step to make a difference in this process?
Wow, okay, big question somewhere, thank you. My next step is actually to look back at this honestly and action this forward. Like, I want to actually collaborate with my colleagues in academia, colleagues in practice, and see where we can drive this forward. I want to be part of this. I don't want my dissertation to stop at this document. I want it to go forward. I see something from it. So this is where I'm gonna flush the ideas, I would say. In the next semester, it's gonna be all research probably, and hopefully just getting in line with my colleagues as well to start where we need to start, like you say. So thank you for the question, appreciate it. Got a question? Okay.
Dad,
Father.
my dear Dad, the country that we immigrated from was full of thousands of things we're not allowed to do,
Okay.
and very few things that we are allowed to do. We all accepted every restraint except one thing. When I couldn't enroll my daughter in the universities, I decided to leave that place.
Correct.
And I flew with you to Canada. You know how much I love this place.
Yes, I know.
But the most important thing and my goal is to see you at this point defending your thesis or dissertation, as you say it here, with all respect to the decision of the committee, which I really honor and I accept, I don't know, but if you are what I want you to be, I think that I have achieved, my little goal in life. But are you happy, Riham?
Oh my God.
Thank you.
So the question came from my father, who loves to make me cry, by the way. He said, in very short terms, that basically we left the defining decision to leave Saudi Arabia was that I was not allowed to attend university there. So he made that hard decision, and I know how much he left. So seeing me today, and I'm defending it with all respect, of course, to my beloved community's decision, if I am who I am, you made everyone cry, Dad. Anyway, so he asked me, are you happy? Wow. I feel very complete today. I feel very happy. I fought a lot of battles too myself, personally, health-wise. I mean, this was supposed to happen in June, but I was in the hospital, so they told me I cannot do that from the hospital. They all know. I think I am finally happy. I think I am finally happy.
I am proud of you.
Thank you. Knows how to make a girl cry, doesn't it?
Yes, I see another hand.
That's really hard to follow.
I know, right?
But just to say, certainly on behalf of the Windsor Essex Local Immigration Partnership, which is a 100-member community planning body, which works to create a more welcoming Windsor at all levels, systemic and structural, as well as at those very program levels and things. I do have some questions that perhaps we can do over coffee later, because I think you've more than answered, but just to say that we certainly as an organization are ready to and have been waiting for these results to see how this can inform our work. And one of the things that we have done, and Riham as the co-chair of this committee, is create an anti-racism equity kind of reconciliation committee to look at the context of how we do this work. And I think today there's some things that we can mine out in terms of often the responsibility for people settling in Canada to be successful here is upon them, and we need to shine the light back on ourselves in terms of those of us that are well established here, or particularly those of us that fit into that whiteness, that colonial settler kind of identity, in terms of what's our piece of this, and really letting that inform our work, and I think there's a lot here that is very rich that is gonna help us in that journey. So I won't put you on the spot, because I'm so many questions, but to say thank you, and this is really gonna be a living document that I think will have meaningful traction to guide some of the work that we do in the community going forward, so thank you.
So much. I know that will happen. I mean, thank you for mentioning the group. That's true. The moment I heard inclusion and anti-racism, I said, sign me up. This is what I'm here for. But honestly, so the chair of the Windsor Essex Local Immigration Partnership is inviting further talk to, make this an actionable document. And I know that you guys are ready. I know that Michelle and I have also already kind of like teased out, okay, can we sit back on this, And that's what I want to come back with. And that's what I said, like, I don't want my document to sit still. I want it to be an actionable in research. I want it to be an actionable in practice, and wherever else I can take it. Let me say that. So, yeah, thank you for that commitment. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate you.
Okay, if there are no further questions at this time, I think this is a good moment to say, let's let the living document move. And if you all don't mind just leaving the room for a few minutes while we discuss some free time, I will come and get you when we're ready.
Got it. For
Thank
sure.
you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
مين هذا الجاكيت بابا؟ في حدا نسي جاكيت؟
Thank you. Oh, that's okay. Thank you so much.
No, I got it.
بعد في القرار بعد مستنى. Good job.